The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in the office meeting room, casting a sterile glow that felt oppressive. I sat at the long, polished table, my fingers tapping nervously against the surface, a subconscious attempt to quell the rising tide of anxiety. My notes, meticulously prepared and arranged, were supposed to guide my presentation today, but as I glanced around the room, I felt a growing sense of unease. Where were they? A pit formed in my stomach as I realized the truth. My notes were missing. As I searched the tabletop, my eyes darted to my colleague Mark, who sat confidently at the head of the table. He was flipping through a stack of papers, and my heart raced as I recognized the familiar layout of my own work. I couldn't believe it, he had stolen my notes. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow, and I felt my cheeks flush with a mix of anger and humiliation. What was once a collaborative environment now felt like a battlefield, and I was unarmed. Mark cleared his throat, drawing my attention back to him. "I'm excited to present the data on our latest project. I think you'll all find it quite enlightening," he said, his voice smooth and rehearsed. I fought the urge to interrupt, to scream that the ideas he was about to present were mine. Instead, I sat frozen, each word he spoke twisting the knife deeper. The laughter that erupted around the table felt like shards of glass cutting into my dignity. I could hardly focus on the rest of the presentation. My mind raced, replaying moments of our interactions, his charming smile, the way he would nod while I spoke, feigning interest. Had it all been an act? I felt the heat of betrayal seep into my bones, a chilling reminder of how fragile trust could be. As the meeting dragged on, I forced myself to breathe, trying to calm the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside me. I needed to maintain my integrity, but how could I do that when I felt so utterly violated? The room buzzed with conversation, but all I could hear was the echo of my own thoughts. I would not let this go unanswered. The seed of revenge began to take root, and I knew I had to devise a plan to reclaim what was rightfully mine. The coffee break area buzzed with the usual chatter, but today, the laughter felt hollow, like a distant echo of camaraderie. I stood there, cradling my cup of lukewarm coffee, the bitter aroma mixing with the sweet scent of pastries that lined the table. My fingers twitched, betraying my simmering frustration as I replayed the events of the meeting in my mind. How could I have been so naive? The betrayal stung deeper than I expected, and I was left to grapple with the weight of my colleague's treachery. As I leaned against the counter, I caught sight of Lisa entering the room. Her expression was a mixture of concern and determination. "Ella, we need to talk. I can't believe what just happened," she said, her voice low but urgent. I appreciated her loyalty, but the thought of discussing my vulnerability made my stomach churn. I took a sip of my coffee, hoping to mask my unease, but the warmth did little to soothe the cold knot in my gut. "I know, Lisa, I didn't see it coming. I thought he was on my side," I confessed, my voice cracking slightly. The betrayal felt like a dark cloud hanging over me, suffocating my resolve. I could feel the weight of her gaze, urging me to confront my feelings. Yet part of me wanted to retreat, to hide from the reality that my trust had been shattered. "You can't let him get away with this, Ella. You have to confront him," Lisa urged, her intensity matching the flickering fluorescent lights overhead. I wanted to believe her words, to feel that spark of determination ignite within me, but fear crept in like a thief in the night. What if confronting him only made things worse? What if I lost more than I already had? I took a deep breath, steeling myself against the tide of doubt. "You're right, I can't let this slide." "I need to expose the truth," I replied, my voice firmer than I felt. The determination coursing through me felt like a flickering flame, fragile yet persistent. I glanced around the room, noticing the casual interactions of my colleagues, oblivious to the chaos brewing beneath the surface. They were all caught in their own narratives, unaware of the storm that was about to unfold. After a brief pause, I added, "But what if it backfires? What if I lose everything?" The reality of the stakes hit me hard, like a punch to the gut. I had invested so much in my career, and the thought of risking it all for revenge sent shivers down my spine. But then again, how could I stand by and let him tarnish my reputation without a fight? As I stepped away from the coffee counter, I felt the weight of my decision settle in. I knew I had to confront him, but the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty. Determination surged within me, mingled with a sense of dread. I had to be strategic. I couldn't let my emotions cloud my judgment. The next move was crucial, and I needed to prepare myself for what lay ahead. The air in the meeting room felt charged, a thick tension wrapping around me as I prepared to face my colleagues again. I could hear the faint rustling of papers, the nervous shuffling of feet, and the low hum of whispers that seemed to echo my own anxiety. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting harsh shadows that danced across the walls, a stark contrast to the warmth I once felt in this space. My heart raced as I recalled the events of the last few days, the betrayal that had shaken my resolve to its core. I took a deep breath, the crisp scent of fresh coffee mingling with the stale odor of fear and uncertainty that permeated the room. My mind drifted back to the presentation where my colleague, Ryan, had stood confidently before the team, my work in his hands, presenting my notes as if they were his own. The betrayal stung, a visceral reminder of the trust I had placed in him. I clenched my fists beneath the table, feeling the cool surface beneath my palms, grounding me in the moment. As I scanned the room, I caught sight of Lisa, my best friend, her expression a mixture of sympathy and concern. She had always been my anchor, the one person who understood the weight of my ambition and the sacrifices I had made. But now I feared that even she would question my integrity after what had happened. I could feel my resolve hardening. I wouldn't let this injustice define me. I was determined to reclaim my reputation. "Ella, are you okay?" Lisa whispered, leaning closer, her eyes searching mine for reassurance. I forced a smile, though it felt fragile like glass ready to shatter. "I'm fine, just processing everything." My voice was steady, but inside, a storm brewed. I could hear the echoes of my colleagues' laughter from the lounge, a haunting reminder of the camaraderie that now felt lost. The moment of truth arrived as David, the team leader, called the meeting to order. "Let's address the recent changes and the concerns that have been raised," he said, his tone serious. I felt the weight of eyes on me, some curious, others judgmental. I could almost hear their thoughts. How could she let this happen? My stomach twisted, but I reminded myself to stand firm. When David mentioned Ryan's presentation, I felt a surge of anger. "It's important to clarify that the information presented was not his work alone," I interjected, my voice cutting through the tension. "Those were my notes, and I believe we need to discuss the implications of that theft." I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, the adrenaline pumping through my veins as I spoke. The room fell silent, the only sound the rustling of papers as colleagues exchanged glances. Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his confidence faltering. "Ella, I think we need to move past this and focus on the bigger picture," he replied, a hint of desperation in his voice. "No, we can't just brush this aside," I shot back, my heart pounding. "This isn't just about me, it's about trust and integrity within our team. We can't afford to ignore what's happened." My voice trembled slightly, betraying my anger, but I pressed on, unwilling to back down. David cleared his throat, glancing between us. "Let's try to keep this constructive. Ella, what do you propose we do about the situation?" His question hung in the air, a challenge that ignited a fire within me. I had to take action to ensure that this injustice didn't go unrecognized. As the meeting continued, I felt a mix of resolve and anger coursing through me. I knew my next steps would be pivotal, not just for my reputation, but for my sense of self. I couldn't allow Ryan's betrayal to silence me. Instead, it would become the catalyst for my fight back. With each word exchanged, I began to formulate a plan in my mind, a way to reclaim what was rightfully mine and expose the truth behind the facade. Though my heart raced, I felt a determination building within me that I hadn't anticipated. This was just the beginning, and I would ensure that the world knew the truth. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead in my cramped office, a constant reminder of the tension that had taken root since the disastrous meeting. I sat at my desk, staring blankly at the mess of papers strewn before me, each one a testament to the chaos that had spiraled out of control. The hum of the air conditioning was a haunting backdrop, amplifying the silence that enveloped the room, interrupted only by the distant chatter of my colleagues. The smell of burnt coffee lingered in the air, a bitter reminder of my own failures as I rubbed my temples, trying to stave off the headache brewing in the depths of my mind. Memories of the client meeting flooded back, each moment replaying like a broken record. I could still hear the sharp words of my colleagues, their accusations slicing through me like a blade. How had I underestimated the impact of my decisions? I thought I was protecting the company, but instead, I had opened the floodgates to resentment. I felt a surge of anger towards my colleague who had presented my stolen notes. It was as if he had taken my very essence and turned it against me, and I knew I had to act. My fingers danced over the keyboard as I began to outline my plan, the adrenaline coursing through my veins like a drug, fueling my determination. I leaned back in my chair, allowing my gaze to wander across the room. A mirror hung on the wall, reflecting my anxious expression. I could see the tension etched into my features, the lines of worry deepening as I wrestled with my thoughts. What if my plan backfired? What if I lost everything in my quest for vindication? But the fire of betrayal ignited a fierce resolve within me. I would not be a victim, I would be the architect of my own fate. I could feel the anticipation building as I envisioned my next steps. I had to be careful, calculated. Revenge, while sweet, needed to be executed with precision. I glanced at the clock, its ticking echoing the passing time, reminding me that the client presentation was fast approaching. The stakes had never been higher, and I needed to ensure that my plan was flawless. I took a deep breath, trying to quell the rising tide of nerves. My heart raced as I scribbled down my thoughts, the ink flowing across the page like the torrent of emotions within me. I could almost hear my best friend Lisa's voice urging me to stand up for myself, to take control of the narrative that had spiraled out of my grasp. The thought of her encouragement gave me strength, but the weight of my own doubts lingered like a shadow. With each passing moment, I meticulously crafted my strategy. I envisioned the presentation room, the faces of my colleagues twisted in disbelief as I unveiled the truth. My heart raced at the thought of the chaos that would ensue, but deep down, I knew this was necessary. I had to reclaim my power and expose the betrayal that had threatened to dismantle everything I had worked for. My plan was simple yet effective, designed to turn the tables on my colleague while revealing the truth of his deceit. As I jotted down the final details, a sense of calm washed over me, a newfound clarity that had eluded me in the past days. The anticipation hung heavy in the air as I prepared for the confrontation. I could feel the energy shifting within me, a mixture of excitement and trepidation. This was my moment to shine, to prove that I wouldn't be silenced. The clock ticked down and I knew I had to be ready. I stood up, smoothing my blazer, feeling the fabric against my skin, a reassuring reminder of the strength I needed to embody. I would not falter again. The time for action was upon me and I was ready to face whatever may come. My heart surged with determination as I took one last look in the mirror. This was it. I was about to reclaim what was mine, and I would not let anything stand in my way. The air in the office was thick with unspoken words as I took a seat at the long conference table, the sleek surface gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Tension hung like a heavy curtain, muffling the chatter and laughter that usually filled the space. I was acutely aware of the stares directed my way, colleagues who had once shared camaraderie now casting suspicious glances. I could feel the heat rising to my cheeks, my heart pounding in my chest as I prepared for the mediation session. Lisa sat across from me, her expression a mix of hope and skepticism. "We just need to talk through this, Ella. We can find a way to resolve things together," she said, her voice steady but the slight tremor in her hands betrayed her anxiety. I nodded, desperate for some semblance of peace, yet the weight of our shared history felt like an anchor, dragging me down into uncertainty. As the meeting commenced, I took a deep breath, inhaling the faint scent of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the stale air of tension. "I want us to work together to mend the rift caused by my decisions. I know I've made mistakes, but I genuinely believe we can turn this around," I stated, my voice wavering slightly. The room fell silent, and I could feel the weight of their disbelief pressing down on me like a lead blanket. David, one of the senior analysts, leaned forward, his brow furrowed in concern. "Ella, do you even understand the gravity of what you've done? We're not just talking about numbers here. You've jeopardized our relationships with clients. It's going to take more than just words to fix this." His tone was sharp, and I felt a pang of regret stab at my resolve. Memories flooded back, our team celebrating milestones, the laughter we shared over late-night projects. How had it come to this? I could see the disappointment etched on their faces, the trust I had taken for granted now shattered like glass. I clenched my fists beneath the table, trying to muster the courage to respond. "I know that I've betrayed our trust, but I'm committed to making it right. Let's brainstorm ways we can demonstrate our value to our clients and rebuild what's been lost," I pleaded, my voice rising with urgency. Yet my words seemed to bounce off the walls, met with a wall of silence. Lisa's gaze flickered between me and the rest of the team, her expression pulling me back from the brink of despair. "We need to focus on solutions, not dwell on the past," she urged, her voice cutting through the tension like a lifeline. Despite her encouragement, I could feel the tide turning against me. I sensed the frustration bubbling just beneath the surface, the resentment simmering in the air. It was as if the room itself had become a battleground, and I was the lone soldier standing amidst the chaos. As the session dragged on, I attempted to outline a plan, but each suggestion was met with doubts and criticisms. I could hear the whispers of discontent, the murmurs of my colleagues reflecting the turmoil within. "How can we trust you again, Ella?" David's question echoed in my mind, a haunting reminder of the chasm that had formed between us. The mediation ended with no resolution, only a heavy sense of disappointment that hung in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. I left the conference room feeling defeated, my heart heavy with the weight of their mistrust. The hope of reconciliation had slipped through my fingers, and I could only wonder how I would ever bridge the gap I had created. As I walked back to my office, the fluorescent lights flickering overhead felt like a cruel reminder of my failures. The atmosphere was oppressive, the hum of the office now a background noise to the chaos in my mind. I had wanted peace, but all I felt was the bitter sting of loss, and I knew I would have to confront my colleagues again soon, perhaps even in a more chaotic setting than before. The anticipation in the office was palpable as I prepared for the presentation that would either vindicate or bury me. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, illuminating the sterile environment that felt more like a cage than a workspace. My palms were clammy against the cool surface of my desk, the weight of my decisions pressing down on me like a heavy shroud. I could hear the soft hum of conversation outside my door, colleagues whispering about the impending meeting, their doubts swirling like a storm ready to break. As I gazed out the window, the city skyline glimmered under the morning sun, a stark contrast to the turmoil raging within me. I recalled the last disastrous meeting, the accusations flung at me like daggers, and the disappointment etched on Lisa's face. Each memory felt like a reminder of my failures, yet I couldn't let fear paralyze me. I had to seize this moment and take control. With a deep breath, I closed my eyes, envisioning the outcome I desired. I refused to be at the mercy of my colleagues' betrayal any longer. My heart raced with determination. I would expose the truth behind the theft of my notes during this presentation. I couldn't afford to waver now. The stakes were too high. I recalled the words I had practiced countless times, each syllable echoing in my mind. This is not just about numbers, it's about trust and integrity. I had to make them see the reality of the situation, not just the surface-level chaos. The thought of standing before my colleagues, revealing the truth, ignited a fire within me. I could already envision their reactions, their disbelief turning into respect as I took my stand. Yet a flicker of doubt crept in, whispering that I might be risking everything, my reputation, my relationships, even my career. But the thought of remaining silent, of allowing my colleague to triumph through deceit, was unbearable. I had to act. I had to show them that I was not just a victim but a force to be reckoned with. This was my moment, and I would face the consequences head-on, come what may. As I stood up, straightening my blazer and smoothing my hair back, I felt a surge of confidence wash over me. I might be stepping into the lion's den, but I would not back down. I would reclaim my narrative and ensure that this ends with me, not him. My heart pounded with resolve as I walked toward the conference room, ready to face whatever awaited me on the other side. Sitting at my cluttered desk, I felt a wave of adrenaline rush through me as I began to sketch out my plan for revenge. The soft hum of the office air conditioning blended with the distant chatter of colleagues, creating a backdrop of tension that fueled my resolve. I could smell the faint aroma of burnt coffee lingering in the air, a reminder of the late nights I had spent poring over my notes, now stolen by my colleague. It was time to reclaim what was mine, and I could almost hear the heartbeat of my determination echoing in my ears. I gathered my strategic notes, the pages filled with ideas and sketches, each one a piece of the puzzle I needed to solve. The smooth surface of the paper felt reassuring against my fingertips, grounding me in the midst of chaos. I had to keep it simple. Overcomplicating the plan could lead to missteps, and I couldn't afford to falter now. My mind raced with possibilities, and as I scribbled down my thoughts, I felt a mix of excitement and nervousness, like standing at the edge of a precipice, ready to leap. Flashes of my colleague's smug face during the last presentation invaded my thoughts, a reminder of my humiliation. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, but I pushed it aside, channeling that anger into my plan. I needed to ensure that he faced the consequences of his actions, and I was determined to execute my strategy flawlessly. I imagined the look on his face when he realized the fallout from my actions. It would be a moment of sweet vindication. As I paced around my office, my mind darted between the logistics of the plan and the potential risks involved. I had to consider every angle, ensuring that I left no room for error. The walls seemed to close in around me, but instead of feeling trapped, I felt empowered. I was taking control of my narrative, and that realization sent a thrill through me. I glanced at the brainstorming wall, covered in colorful sticky notes filled with ideas and potential allies. Each note represented a step towards my goal, a reminder that I was not alone in this battle. "This ends with me," I whispered to myself, my voice barely audible over the hum of the office. I was ready to turn the tables, and as I finalized my plans, a sense of clarity washed over me. I had to be strategic, smart, and above all, unyielding. My heart raced with anticipation as I prepared for the next phase, knowing that the execution of my plan was just around the corner. The thrill of revenge was intoxicating, and I was ready to embrace it, no matter the cost. The client meeting room buzzed with anticipation, a palpable tension filling the air as I stood at the front, poised to execute my carefully crafted plan. The polished conference table reflected the harsh fluorescent lights overhead, creating an almost sterile atmosphere that felt suffocating. My hands trembled slightly, the coolness of the metal projector remote grounding me as I prepared to unveil the truth. I could hear the faint rustle of papers and the quiet murmurs of my colleagues, their eyes darting between me and the clock, each tick amplifying the weight of the moment. As I glanced at my colleague who had stolen my notes, a rush of satisfaction coursed through me, mingled with a tinge of anxiety. his confident demeanor was a facade. I could see the slight twitch of his jaw, the way he wiped his palms against his trousers, betraying his own unease. Memories of betrayal flashed through my mind, how he had presented my hard work as his own, the shock and humiliation I felt in that moment. Now I was ready to turn the tables. I took a deep breath, allowing the scent of fresh coffee and polished wood to fill my lungs, steadying my racing heart. "Thank you all for being here today," I began, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions swirling within me. I caught Lisa's gaze among the audience, her expression a mix of curiosity and skepticism, and it fueled my resolve. I needed to show her and everyone else that I could reclaim my position of authority and trust. As I launched into my presentation, weaving together facts and compelling narratives, I felt the tension in the room shift. I spoke with passion about the importance of integrity, backing it up with evidence of how my colleagues' actions had jeopardized our client relationships. The air crackled with energy, and I could sense the collective realization dawning on my colleagues. I had transformed from the villain of the story to a champion of accountability. Then, I watched as my colleague's confidence began to wane. His earlier bravado crumbled, replaced by a look of panic as I presented irrefutable evidence of his deceit. The room fell silent, the gravity of the situation settling heavily around us. I could almost hear the collective intake of breath as the realization hit them. This wasn't just about budget cuts anymore, it was about trust and integrity. With each passing moment, I felt a surge of triumph, but it was tempered by the weight of the stakes. I had rehearsed this moment countless times, but standing before them, I felt the full force of their scrutiny. I needed to remain composed to ensure that my plan succeeded without a hitch. The tension was suffocating, and I could almost taste the bitterness of betrayal still lingering in the air. I pressed on, determined to see my plan through to the end, ready to embrace the chaos that lay ahead as the presentation reached its climax. As I concluded, a wave of satisfaction washed over me. The room erupted into murmurs, the tension finally breaking. I had done it, I had stood my ground and executed my plan. But in the back of my mind, I knew this was just the beginning. The fallout would be significant, and I would have to navigate the aftermath carefully to rebuild what had been lost. But for now, I allowed myself a moment of victory, feeling the weight of betrayal begin to lift as I took a step towards reclaiming my place. The aftermath of the presentation disaster hung over the office like a heavy fog, thick with tension and unspoken words. I stood in the doorway of my office, observing the chaos that had erupted following my colleague's catastrophic performance. The sterile walls, once a backdrop for collaboration, now felt like prison bars, closing in on me as I processed the reality of what had occurred. Papers were strewn across desks, and the low murmur of frantic conversations filled the air, a stark contrast to the silence that had engulfed me in the moments before the chaos unfolded. As I stepped inside, a wave of relief washed over me, mingled with a sense of closure that I had long yearned for. I had seen my colleague squirm under the weight of his deception when the truth was laid bare in front of our clients. The glances exchanged among my team spoke volumes. They were beginning to see the cracks in his facade. I felt a flicker of vindication, but it was quickly overshadowed by the realization that the road to reclaiming my reputation was still fraught with challenges. I took a moment to reflect on the events that had led us here. The memories of the betrayal, the tension in the air during the presentation, and the raw emotions that had surged through me flooded my mind. I had fought to maintain my integrity amidst an onslaught of doubt and disappointment. Now, as I navigated the aftermath, I could sense a shift in the atmosphere. My colleagues were starting to rally together, united by a common cause. "Ella, you handled that beautifully," David said as he approached, his expression a blend of pride and relief. The warmth in his voice was a balm to my frayed nerves. "I knew you could do it. You stood your ground when it mattered most." I managed a small smile, the weight of his support lifting my spirits. As the day progressed, I noticed my colleagues exchanging glances filled with newfound respect. They began to approach me, sharing their thoughts and ideas on how we could move forward as a team. Each conversation felt like a stitch binding the wounds of our fractured relationships, and I could feel the tension beginning to dissipate. The air was no longer thick with resentment, it was charged with hope and determination. Finally, I gathered everyone in the conference room for an open discussion. The atmosphere was palpable with anticipation as I laid out my vision for rebuilding our team and restoring our client relationships. I spoke from the heart, acknowledging my past mistakes but also emphasizing our collective potential to rise from the ashes of this crisis. When the meeting concluded, a sense of relief washed over me. I could see the glimmers of trust beginning to be rebuilt among my colleagues. As they filed out, I felt a wave of closure envelop me. I had faced the consequences of my actions and emerged stronger, not just as a leader but as a member of a team that was willing to stand by each other. This was a turning point, the beginning of a new chapter where integrity and collaboration would take precedence. I was ready to embrace the future, knowing that together we could navigate any storm that lay ahead. As I sat in the quiet of my office, the weight of the past few months began to lift, replaced by a sense of newfound clarity. The soft hum of the air conditioning was a comforting backdrop as I reflected on the tumultuous journey I had endured. A sense of satisfaction washed over me, knowing I had faced my fears, reclaimed my reputation, and rebuilt the bridges I had once burned. I glanced out the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, a beautiful reminder that endings could also be beginnings. The echoes of laughter and camaraderie that filled the office now felt like a warm embrace, a stark contrast to the cold silence that had once plagued my workspace. My colleagues had begun to trust me again, and I could see the flickers of hope in their eyes during our meetings. It was a delicate dance, but I was committed to leading with integrity and empathy, ensuring that every voice would be heard. The lessons learned were etched in my heart, guiding my decisions as I navigated this new chapter. I thought of David. His unwavering support had been my anchor, reminding me to balance ambition with compassion. I had promised myself to be a leader who prioritizes relationships over profits, to create an environment where collaboration thrived. As I closed my laptop, a wave of determination surged within me. My journey was far from over. It was merely the beginning of a new path filled with possibilities. With a smile, I turned my attention to my growing online community, where I planned to share my story and insights. I wanted to inspire others who faced similar challenges, to show them that redemption is possible. I felt a surge of excitement as I drafted my next video script, eager to connect with my audience and encourage them to embrace their own journeys. As I wrapped up my thoughts, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. My experiences had shaped me, and I was ready to share that journey with the world. I took a deep breath, knowing that the future held endless opportunities and I was prepared to seize them. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell.